Voice for humanity.
9:36 exactly, and we move on with the show. Next online is Hafiz Ebrahim Moosa. Hope I've got that correctly this time around. He's a senior researcher at Palestine Information Network, and he's here to talk to us about the Palestinian situation. And every time we talk to Ebrahim Moosa or BDS or any organization, Africa for Palestine, about the Palestinian issue, I am very, very saddened to say that it seems that despite all of our efforts, the situation seems to be getting progressively worse. Ibrahim Musa, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program. And would I be correct in my assessment that things are not getting better, it just seems to be getting worse for the Palestinian people?
Indeed, Julie, especially with regard to the news that you've shared, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, the developments in Jerusalem. It's almost as if we have a limited attention span, and it really go back to plans that have been well developed to continue, with the process of annexation of land and occupation. We've got similar sad news, unfortunately, coming out of the Gaza Strip, where once again, there's Israel reneging on pledges it's made in the aftermath of the war that took place in May. And once again, there's the specter of, armed conflict once again arising in the Gaza Strip. But on the positive side, as you had covered yesterday, we had, for instance, the release of Sheikh Raed Salah and release of other Palestinian political prisoners, a few in recent days, and I think their reintegration into Palestinian society and the emotions that go along with that do once again, inject some impetus into the Palestinian struggle to continue the just fight.
Sadly, we now understand that Israel is planning to build 6 Jewish settlements in occupied East Jerusalem. That's in the heart of Palestinian neighbourhoods and towns. And this is according to documents obtained by Haaretz. So what exactly is the state of play there? And I know for a long time, or rather over the past while, we were focusing on issues around the Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan neighbourhoods. It seems like those people are going to be unsettled, are they not? They're going to be affected by these new settlements.
Yes, that's correct. I just want to focus, Julie, on a tweet by an Israeli activist in Jerusalem who speaks about this. Obviously, Sheikh Jarrah has become a household name in the wake of the events of last May and so forth, and people have been following it. And even here in South Africa, activists such as Mona Al-Kart have come to South Africa. You have Daniel Siedemann saying that Sheikh Jarrah is not the story of one eviction case, but there are dozens of similar and coordinated eviction proceedings involving dozens, that's hundreds of Palestinian families in Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah, with thousands of souls in danger of displacement. And I think that's important to understand that Sheikh Jarrah, the high-profile cases in Sheikh Jarrah are not the exception, but rather the norm throughout occupied East Jerusalem. And therefore, there's a need to act accordingly in terms of the activism and understand what is at stake here. It's basically, the wider plan that Israel always had, maximum Palestinian geography with, maximum Palestinian geography with minimum Palestinian demography, and that's what's going on. In terms of Sheikh Jarrah, there was in and out court proceedings until this point in time, where the Israeli court put it down to the Palestinian residents that you've got now an option to become long-term residents or long-term tenants in your home. You will have to pay a rent to the Israeli settlement groups, and the Palestinians rejected this as out of hand, because by that very acknowledgement, even if you're allowed to stay in your home, but by paying that rent, be it even a symbolic rent, you are acknowledging a power dynamic, and you're acknowledging an ownership dynamic, and you are ceasing to have any sort of allegiance to that land. And even though the Israelis would say that we will sort out the ownership issues 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, this is a well-worn tactic for kicking issues into Dutch. And I found this to be a kind of parallel to the peace process. And it's those same Israeli tactics that play here when it comes to land ownership. When it came to the peace process, the Oslo process, 1992, 1994, etc., it was let's sign some principles, you recognize the state of Israel, and we'll deal with the final status issues come 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. And we've seen how that process has unraveled, how in the interim, playing for time, Israel created effect on the ground, and 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, none of those final status serious issues were discussed. And it's the same thing that has been proposed to the residents of Sheikh Jarrah, that you can stay here for the meanwhile, we'll give you some sort of privileges, you just have to pay a symbolic rent, but the major issues of ownership, we'll deal with it later. In the interim, while Palestinians are waiting for those major issues of ownership to be discussed, the situation will be irrevocably changed in Jerusalem in terms of demographics, and people will eventually just be forced to submit.
And finally, we do know that in recent years, settler groups have filed lawsuits against Palestinian residents of the neighborhoods that you're talking about, Sheikh Jarrah, Silwan, and Beit al-Hawa, to prove that Jewish tenants have ownership of Palestinian land and property since before 1948, during the British Mandate, or before the British seized Palestine from Ottoman rule in 1917. Now that's pretty ludicrous, is it not? That really takes away any ownership rights that the rightful owners of the land have, and that is the Palestinian people.
Correct, and Julie, this needs to be seen one would be the settler organizations who are now exploiting these laws, but one has to look at the Israeli judicial system, who has promulgated these laws in the first place and made them applicable to areas such as Sheikh Jarrah and other neighborhoods of Jerusalem. So here they are using things like the absentee property law, which applies to 1948, when Israel enacted the Nakba. Palestinians naturally had to, were forced out of their homes. Some fled in fear with the intention of returning. And the Israelis went back to the fact that people, even if they were absent from their homes at the onset of the creation of the State of Israel for a millisecond, they would lose those homes, and it would go to Israeli landlords, and it's these kind of laws that have allowed the Israeli colonization activity in Jerusalem to gather steam. So we need to appreciate the different players in here. One is the Israeli police who do the enactment. One is the such laws that are promulgated to enable the theft of land. Then you have the settler groups, which basically are middlemen, which are used by the Israelis to fight these cases in courts. Once they gain the land, they are given back to the state, and thereafter used for whatever purposes the state will see fit. And it's also then worthwhile in this discussion looking at the Israeli master plans for the city of Jerusalem, and how whatever we're seeing in the legal sphere is something that is leading towards the enaction of those master plans. So there's the Jerusalem 2020 plan, there's the Maron plan, there's the Jerusalem 2050 plan, and all of these seek to increase Jewish population in Jerusalem at the expense of Palestinian population, make this a high-tech hub to attract talent and Jews from all over the world. make this a tourist hub as well, and all of this in the process erasing the Palestinians. So we are not surprised at all when we see these developments as Israel is just continuing with plans that have been published or not published but are well known in the public sphere.
And that's where we will have to leave it. Unfortunately, we will talk again with you sometime in the future. Just a very quick and short answer. What happens to these Palestinian people then when they're driven out of their homes and their land? Where do they go to? Are they being forced out of Palestine completely? Or, is there some sort of secondary accommodation available to them?
It generally puts more pressure, Julie, on other Palestinian families, relatives in Jerusalem, where they would have to take in these families for a period of time. The idea of building again would be impossible because it's impossible to get a building permit. I just saw today that the cost of a building permit is something like $30,000. Which is equivalent of close to 500,000 South African rands. So that's not an option. Families would have to absorb them for a temporary basis. The idea is eventually to force people out because they would not have any choice. Would they go to the West Bank or would they even go overseas? But many of them have stayed in these difficult circumstances with family.
We do know that there's a large Palestinian diaspora all over the world. Before we get there, Ebrahim, can I just ask you please to bear with me? Let's take an ad break. We'll come back and continue this discussion, inshallah.
Looking to get your kick? Kiki's have now reopened on 235 Matthews Maiwa Road in Durban. Head on over for the Taste with Kick. We offer something scrumptious for everyone in the family. Wraps, chicken tikka, burgers, tender grills, mocktails, milkshakes, and so much more. Corporate and events catering available. Visit our social media pages for more info or call 031 209 0119. Kiki's, the Taste with Kick.
Africa Muslims Agency teams are on the ground in Afghanistan. Millions of people go daily without food. You can heal Afghanistan. Sponsor towards feeding a family at 1,500 in a month or any amount. Visit africamuslimsagency.co.za or call 011 834 8685. Africa Muslims Agency, inspiring the spirit of giving.
What makes Randery Jewelers the optimum place for your memorable gift? Is it our range of exclusive, high-end, luxurious jewellery? Or is it our master craftsmanship of all your bespoke jewellery needs? We believe it's because at Randery Jewelers, we know just how to make your special moments last forever. Whether it's for a wedding, anniversary, or just a simple gift to show your love, trust Randery Jewelers to make it special. www.randeryjewelers.com. Make your moments last forever with Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
Little bare feet on the icy wet ground. A shiver at his lips. Mud on his clothes. When he is cold, the hunger is worse. The nights are longer and the pain is more severe. What if this was your child? The Al-Imdad Foundation's Global Winter Appeal allows you to make a difference for refugees, IDPs, and struggling communities in 21 countries globally. Sponsor a winter pack today for just 600 Rand. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243. Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
It is exactly 9:50 a.m. News and views right here on Salam Media. My guest is senior researcher at the Palestine Information Network, and that is you, Brian Musa, to talk about, obviously, the settlements in Palestine neighborhoods of East Jerusalem. But I also want to, still on the subject of Palestine, the people, the helplessness of their situation. And for a very long time, Ebrahim, world leaders have been talking about the two-state solution. That has gone rather quiet. I want to make some statements, share some statements that were made by Tayyip Erdogan, obviously the Turkish president, and I'd like your response to that. The first one being no peace without two-state solution. This has been on the table for a very long time and it's gone very quiet. Are the Palestinian people happy if that should go ahead? And in terms of the two states, where would the Palestinians be housed? And will it be a fair division of the land? And I guess when you speak about the occupiers, there's no such word as fair and equitable, is there?
Yes, so it's unfortunate, I guess, from a Palestinian perspective that, certain world leaders, even if they, might be supportive of the Palestinian cause in other spheres, continue to cling on to the two-state solution rhetoric. You mentioned the Turkish president there, and, it's a similar criticism for the South African government, despite some very strong pro-Palestinian stances. That's one thing that the South African government does not hear from, which is the idea of a two-state solution. And over the years, various Palestinian statisticians and pollsters have always, kept abreast with the heat of the Palestinian street, or the pulse of the Palestinian street with regard to the one-state and two-state solution. And perhaps there were times in Palestinian history closer to the Oslo time or after that, where this idea of a two-state solution was still highly regarded by maybe a slim majority of the Palestinian population. But we've seen that diminishing, all the more rapidly in recent years, and particularly looking at the promise for some that the Oslo Accords had held, and what was promised the Palestinians. Some people were willing to go down, despite the compromises, anything set against the Palestinians, that semblance of statehood, that semblance of normalcy. People were perhaps willing to live with that. And seeing how Israel has, spectacularly torn apart those accords, not being true to any of the agreements that it's made, except this idea of security coordination, letting the Palestinian Authority, in exchange for some sort of material benefits, be a policeman on behalf of the Israelis. Besides that, nothing else of those accords have been held in order, and the chief architects of those accords, in the form of the Palestinian Authority leadership, which is now symbolized by Mahmoud Abbas, have year on year gone to the United Nations General Assembly, in September and has threatened that we are going to pull out of these accords because Israel is not, meeting its part of the deal. So people who invested their entire lives and entire political careers in the upholding of the Oslo Accords and the idea of a two-state solution have now seen the writing on the wall. And the main question when it comes to the two-state solution is that it was the idea would be that how would it be enactable? How would these the two-state solution play itself out when Israel has created irreparable effects on the ground through the settlements, through extension of its jurisdiction. I mean, when one is to look at Israeli settlements, sometimes we get the idea that these are just outposts, or these are just buildings that would be able to be taken down. And that's the sense that's conveyed by the word settlement. Whereas, these are permanent fixtures. These are entire communities that have been built that are usurping Palestinian resources. So, it's not going to be easy to evict people with so much financial benefit attached to it. And that's why we go back to ideas of the likes of Ilan Pape to say that from the time of the partition of 1947, the whole idea of partition goes against nature, that a indigenous population would be willing to share half of their land inequitably, and all peace plans after that and the two-state solution are based on the idea of partition. And given the impracticability of this, it's perhaps time to think out of the boxes and think of other solutions.
Okay, still with Tayyip Erdogan, he goes on to say, and this was at the 16th conference of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Parliamentary Union in Istanbul. He goes on to say, and I quote, "Jerusalem is not the issue of a group of courageous Muslims, but the issue of all the Muslim world." I'm just wondering how that goes down with the rest of the Muslim world. Statement number one. And number two, which for me is truly powerful as well. He reiterated that making Muslims pay the price of genocide against Jews in Europe during World War II is a kind of oppression and lack of conscience. Two very powerful statements. How do you respond to it? And how come the rest of the world have not been asking these questions?
Again, in the content, those are amazing statements. The first is something that I think is essential for Muslims all over the world. One would be seeing this as a purely Palestinian struggle, but this is a verse of our holy book, and that enshrines its significance right until the end of time. More than 70 times in the Quran, directly or indirectly, is the Holy Land mentioned. And if one cultivates that sort of spiritual connection and justice-based connection to the Holy Land, you'd be able to sacrifice a whole lot more for the cause and see its centrality every day of your life. Then, in terms of it really takes courage.
Okay, I'll just have to rush you here because we've got a minute to wrap up time.
Yes. So the second statement also takes a lot of courage to speak. I think when it comes to rhetoric, the gap between rhetoric and action, that's obviously what's quite critical at the moment, and hopefully such words will be able to push people towards positive action and will not just remain within the realm of words.
Let's hope so, inshallah. And you carry on your amazing work as senior researcher at Palestine Information Network. We need these voices to be heard all of the time, lest the Palestinian people's struggle is forgotten. So Jazakallah indeed for your efforts, your work, and for talking with us on the show this morning. Go well, keep safe, and Assalamu alaikum to you.
Jazakallah khairan, Julie. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
9:59, and that of course brings us to the end of the show today. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed your company this morning. Tomorrow is a public holiday. It's the day of reconciliation. Do everything you can to repair those racial, ethnic, religious divides that we see in our country. It's our duty not to just enjoy a bright tomorrow, but to make sure that we work at reparation of any form. It doesn't matter how small the act might be. Also, a very big thank you to the producers, that's you, Nasreen and Ziad. And once again, follow the COVID protocols religiously, because the new, obviously we know the new wave is getting totally out of hand. Please, please, please stay safe. And on the roads as well, the traffic department and the department, Fikile Mbulula, has said that it's all systems go on the roads to keep people safe on the road. So take care till the next time. As always, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi and Khudafiz from me, Julie Ali.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Juza Day has been brought to you by an anonymous sponsor for the Sali Thawab of our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and all Marhum and Marhumeen, and by the generous sponsor for Ismail and Zubaydah Muhammad of Azadville.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
يعتذرون إليكم إذا رجعتم إليهم قل لا تعتذروا لن نؤمن لكم قد نبأنا الله من أخباركم وسيرى الله عملكم ورسوله ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب